It is time for another Hawk Blogger Mornings. We are kind of doing an emergency pod edition of Hawk Blogger Mornings. We're scheduled to go live at 8:30 a.m. Pacific time, and we've got a great guest coming at 9 a.m. in Ted Nguyen of The Athletic, and it's gonna be a great conversation. Cannot wait for that. But the other thing I could not wait for is to get on here and start talking about the Seahawks schedule, because we've got a decent chunk of the Seahawks schedule already leaked, and I think we need to discuss it live. I think we've got to talk about anything else that comes out during this time. We might as well do it and talk about the implications of that Seahawks schedule. You can support the show, and I'd appreciate it if you do by giving the show a like, clicking subscribe. We're over 10,000 subscribers, on our way to 11, 12, 20, and beyond, and would love to get you on there to help the community grow. And you can support the show by becoming a YouTube member. Link is in the chat. It's in the description of the video. It's a great way to support the show and have a little bit more fun. If that's the way that you consume the show is on YouTube, you pretty much are missing out if you are not a YouTube member. So highly recommend it. It is a fun way to support the show and enhance your experience as a member. So what we know so far, and I'm going to do one quick perusal before I do this. See if there's anything new that I have missed. Seahawks. I'm taking a quick look to see if there's any new schedule leaks. Interestingly, there's one thing I'm not sure about, but it could be that we know that the Seahawks are playing the hated 49ers on week 6 in Seattle on Thursday Night Football. But one of the things that's a little bit sneaky about some of these leaks is I've just noticed for the first time that there's a different logo used for that week. It looks like the throwback. So we might be getting throwback jerseys for the 49ers visit to Seattle in week 6. That's a little bit of new info. But let's go ahead and catch everybody up. If you haven't already heard, here's where things stand with the Seahawks schedule. You have week 1 opening up at home against the Broncos. Week 2 at the New England Patriots. Week 3, we do not have that yet. Week 4, Detroit Lions at Detroit. And that will be a Monday night football game. So the first primetime game, at least we think that's the first primetime game for the Seahawks this season. Week 5, the Seahawks get the New York Giants at home. Then we talked about week 6, the San Francisco 49ers come to Seattle for a Thursday night football game, potentially wearing their throwback jerseys. Then we skip ahead to week 13. The Seahawks travel to the New York Jets. And then week 17, the Seahawks travel to the Chicago Bears for what is expected to be a Thursday night football game. So that is 3 primetime games. And that's 3 primetime games. Sorry, I thought I had new information, but you're going to hear me pause a couple times as I pay attention to what I'm reading as I'm talking. But that, again, 3 primetime games. 2 of them are Thursday night games. One of them is a Monday night game. And there is some speculation that the bye week would be week 7, which would be a pretty decent bye week, all things considered. And I have some initial reactions, as I will continue to kind of look to see if there's anything new on the schedule leak front. And then let me bring up a window here where I can take a look on that front. I'm going to do a quick check to see there is this has not been updated, but let me see. I'm going to do a couple quick checks and see if there's any news. Well, we will see if this is accurate. I'm just getting what could be the Seahawks home schedule. Let's see. If this is correct, I'm going to put this in there tentatively for now. Miami Dolphins week 3. So far it's right. Giants week 5. 49ers week 6. Buffalo Bills week 8. Rams week 9. Cardinals week 12. Packers, a Sunday night football game. So another primetime game. Green Bay Packers week 15. And Vikings week 16. Interesting. So we're really at this point only missing. I think we're only missing 5 games. Is that right? We've got how many away games already? 1, 2, 3, 4 away games. And the Seahawks are slated to play 8 away games. Yeah. 8 away, 9 home. So we're missing 4 games. We're missing 4 games. We've almost got the full Seahawks schedule as it stands. This is interesting. So the games that, for what it's worth, that we don't have yet, we don't have at Arizona, we don't have at San Francisco, we don't have at the Rams. So those are 3 of the 4 games are divisional games. I would bet week 18 is going to be a divisional game. And then we do not have at the Atlanta Falcons. That's the one away game that's not a divisional game that we're missing. Let's take a look and see if I can find out anything there. Sleuth around here. I figured I was sitting here sleuthing on my own. I figured we might as well do it as a crew, as a fam. So let's do it together. Seahawks Falcons. Let's see if I can find anything on that. Not so far. Let me see. At Falcons. Yeah, that's one I have not seen so far. Let's see if we can see Seahawks at 49ers. Not seeing that so far either. Let's see if we can find Seahawks at the Rams. Not seeing that yet. The 49ers have 6 primetime games. The Seahawks so far have 4. And the 49ers, for what it's worth, from what I'm seeing, they have 2 Thursday night football games, the same as the Seahawks. They've got 2 Sunday night and 2 Monday night. And let's just see about Cardinals. I'm guessing the Cardinals are going to be that week 18 game. That's my guess. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything new on the Cardinals. But yeah, as it is now, the Seahawks have, what is it? 14 of their, or 13 of their 17 games already on the docket. And we don't know when the bye week will be. Someone is estimating it will be week 7. If it's week 7, then we basically are talking about weeks 10, 11, 14, and 18. I think the only plausible places for the bye week are week 7 and week 10 or 11. If it was week 7, it would be a little interesting because the Seahawks would have a week 6 Thursday night game. And so they would get a pretty elongated bye. I kind of have questions about that. My guess is they're going to have a week 10 bye. Just a guess based off the way the schedule reads, which would be really cool. That would be ideal. Other reactions, I got to say, I like the Seahawks' chances against the Broncos at home. Let's see if we've got any odds already out. Where is this? I have to see what date this is. These are all old. Well, this is 2022. Let's see if Vegas Insider has odds yet. I would have to think the Seahawks are favored in that game. And they have week 1. 2025 week 1 Seahawks Broncos odds. Let's see if this place has any. Not so far. Let me see if I can find anything on Twitter. Seahawks, Broncos, 2024 odds. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything so far. I have to imagine that the Seahawks are going to be favored in that game, and even if they're not, I like the Seahawks' chances. I'm going to do a couple things for you here in a second. I'll tell you what the Seahawks have done in history when they've gone 1-0. I like that they're facing the Patriots away for game 2. I think that's a decent chance to go 2-0. We'll talk about what that has meant historically for the Seahawks and maybe for other teams as well. Let me go ahead and share my current sheet so you guys can see along with me what I'm tracking. It's nothing pretty, but at least you will be able to see what I am seeing. Seahawks 2024 schedule. Share that with you all. Let me make it much bigger. Let's make it even a little bit bigger. Can I go 175? There we go. I'm going to get rid of some of these excess pieces so you can see a little bit more. Let me go full screen. There you go. So you can almost get, let me see if I can, does that work? There we go. So now you guys can see what I am seeing. Hopefully that's showing up for you. But let's take a look at how the Seahawks have done historically when they have gone 1-0. And I'm going to pull up a couple things as I do that. It is, let me pull this. Sorry, folks. So I really enjoy, I enjoy the NFL schedule day. I wish that I kind of like the leaks, but I kind of wish that we got to really get the reveal like you do for selection, like March Madness, Selection Sunday, like you do NFL draft, because I think it'd be a little bit more fun to just really know, like find out at the same time as everybody else. Let me pull this up for other folks. Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and look at what's happened historically when the Seahawks have won their first game. Okay. I'm going to find all the seasons where the Seahawks have won game one. And all right. Find teams with single games. All right. So this is going to be by date. Yeah, by season maybe. Any year. And team is the Seahawks. And game result is a win. And this is week one. Oops, there we go. Week one of the season. All right. Are you ready? Let's find out all the years that the Seahawks have gone 1-0 in week one. Those years they've done it 20 times. 2022 was the most recent. Then they did it 4 years in a row from 2019, 2020, 2021, and 2022. They did it in 2016. They did it in 2014, 2013. Notably, they did not do it in 2005, one of their Super Bowl years. But their 2 Super Bowl years under Pete Carroll, they both were 1-0. And I will say that in all of the Seahawks' best seasons, they have started by going 1-0. The last time that they did go 1-0 was against the Denver Broncos at home. That was a season that ended in the playoffs. despite the fact that it was not a particularly remarkable year. That was Geno's first year. They made the playoffs. They lost to the 49ers in the playoffs, but they did have a winning record. Let's see how many years of those years, how many times did the Seahawks have a winning record? Okay, they did not in 2021. I think this is going to be almost every game, every year that they've won their first game, they've had a winning record. I'm doing the check right now. So far, only 2021 is a year with a losing record. Okay, 2010, they did have a losing record despite winning their first game, but it was a division-winning losing record, and they won a playoff game that year. So that's 2 times. Oh, unfortunately, 2009, so that was a pretty bad year. So that's 3 times. And then, okay, so far 3 times. Well, there's a 500. 4 times, 1994. Another 500. Okay. So out of the Seahawks 20 seasons where they've started 1-0, they have had a winning record for the season in 14 of those 20 seasons. They've had a 500 record in 2, and they've had a losing record in 4. So the odds have been very good for the Seahawks to have a good season when they go 1-0. Now, let's take a look what happens when the Seahawks go 2-0. Let's see if I can figure this out. Let's see. Let's see if this will work. Okay. Limit streak to a single season. It's 2. Game filter. Win. Let's see if we can limit the span of games. We can. 2. And we'll limit this to the Seahawks. All right, let's see if I can get this right. That didn't make sense. Okay, didn't like that. Limit streak to a single season. Let's see if that makes any difference here. Didn't like that either. Something's off in this query. Streak at least 2 games long. Is greater than or equal to 2. Oh, wait. Let's remove this. Streak stat events. Let me see if this will work. I think I just got it. Okay. So there have been 12 times that the Seahawks have started the season 2-0. The last time they did it was 2020. I'm going to verify this. That is correct. 2020 Seahawks, if you don't remember, finished 12-4. I think that was the last time they won the division. They ended up losing to the Rams in the playoffs. That was the year, I believe, they lost to an injured Jared Goff, if I'm remembering correctly, in the playoffs that year. And John Wolford ended up playing. It was not good. But in any event, they were 12-4 that year. They also did it in 2019, and they finished 11-5 that year. They did it in 2013. We know how that year went. They did it in 2006, 9-7. Not great, but they did win the division. So far, that is at least 1, 2, 3 division titles out of 4 seasons when they've started 2-0. Make that 5 out of 6. They did it again in 2004. 5 out of 7. Okay, in 98, they ended up finishing 8-8. So that didn't work out. 94, they finished 6-10. How did they start 2-0 that year? The 94 Seahawks with Rick Meyer and Dan McGuire started out 2-0. And in fact, they won the first 2 games on the road. They even would eventually start out 3-1, beating the Steelers at home, and then would go on to lose 6 games in a row to fall to 3-7. Yikes. That was a bad year. Okay. So that's one example of a bad year when they start 2-0. 88, finished first in the division. 86, 10-6, but third in the division. 85, 8-8. I thought the 85 season was a good one. 84 certainly was. They went 12-4. So when the Seahawks start a season 2-0, they've only done 12 times. If I'm remembering this right, there's basically one season where they were 500. I make that 2 seasons that they were 500, and one season where they had a losing record. That was 94. Yes. Okay. So when the Seahawks start 2-0, in 10 out of the 12 seasons that's happened, they've finished with a winning record. In at least 5 or 6 of those seasons, they've actually won the division. And only one time that they had a losing record. And why am I focusing on that? I think that if you look at this schedule, as it sounds like it's shaping up, I think the Seahawks have a very good chance and should be expected to start 2-0. The Patriots defense last year was very good toward the end of the year. We'll see how it is without Bill Belichick and with their new rookie quarterback and Drake May. The Seahawks are going to have to go on the road. There's stuff going on there, but this is not going to be the toughest Patriots team. It's one of the easier games on their schedule. And then they come home and face the Dolphins. And the Dolphins are an interesting one because obviously they have a very powerful offense. And you'd have to think, oh my gosh, the Seahawks defense against the Dolphins is going to be a mismatch. But let's take a quick look at how Mike Macdonald did against Mr. Mike McDaniel down in Miami last year, because they played them in week 17. The Ravens beat the Dolphins 56-19. This was a a New Year's Eve game, December 31st. The Dolphins, as good as that offense was, managed only 375 yards. They did rush for 154 yards, but they turned it over 3 times. If you get a little farther into that, I'm not saying the Seahawks defense is the Ravens defense, but this does at least an indicator of how did Mike McDaniel do against Mike Macdonald's scheme. And Tua Tagovailoa was 22 of 38, 237 yards, threw 2 touchdowns, but 2 interceptions. He was sacked 3 times. Not a great game. Again, they did give up some yards on the ground. But this was a game that the Dolphins started off reasonably well. And they started off with a touchdown in the first drive. They were up 7-0. The Ravens tied it, and then the Dolphins went back ahead with a field goal. So the Dolphins had 10 points in the first quarter. From there on, it was locked down. They had a field goal, and then they had a late touchdown when they were down 35-13. They scored in the fourth quarter. But for the most part, Mike McDaniel did not have a lot of success against Mike Macdonald last year. Is it possible that the Seahawks go 3-0 with 2 home games? I don't think that's wild. I really don't. And none of this is because I'm like, oh, the Seahawks are great. I don't think the Seahawks are great. But I think the way the schedule's setting up, that's a very favorable first 3 games. Where those games are played, who they're playing, I think that that's a pretty advantageous first 3 games. Doesn't mean that the Seahawks will be unable to lose from there on out, but I think it's favorable. The Lions game, and I see that someone's saying throwback for week 15. Whoops, did not mean to do that. I just tried to edit through my sharing screen, which will not work. I'll add that as a note as we get in new information. And then I'm going to put here as a question mark because I think I'm guessing that's when it's going to be, but not sure. Anyway, the Seahawks have played the Lions in seems like every year lately. They've beat them in Detroit multiple times. So they beat them in Detroit last year. They beat them in Detroit the year before. And what if we take a look at all the games where the Seahawks have played at Detroit? Let's take a look. I bet this will be the first time that the Seahawks have ever played in Detroit, maybe ever either place as a Monday night game. That would, I don't think that's happened too often. All right. So team Seahawks. Opponent Lions. Let's just get all the games for right now. All right. The Seahawks have played the Lions actually the last 3 seasons. So they played them in the 2021 season as well. That was at home. Yep. The Seahawks have played them the last 3 seasons. They've won each game. They've almost all been very high scoring. In 2021, they won 51-29 at home. Then in 2022, they won 48-45 in Detroit. And then last year, they also won in Detroit in overtime, 37-31. So a ton of points between these two games. The last time the Seahawks played the Lions on Monday Night Football was 2015. In fact, that's the only time in the entire team's 45 plus year history that they've played a primetime game at all, as far as I can tell. Let me double check if there's any evening games. Game time. Let's see if this will show game time. Sorry, folks. Just trying to check something. Okay. Yeah. So again, the only time the Seahawks played a primetime game against the Lions was 2015. In that game, the Seahawks won 13-10. This was in Seattle. It was a nail biter. The Seahawks were up 13-3, and then in the fourth quarter, Karen Reed returned a fumble 27 yards for a touchdown to make it 13-10. That's where it stayed. So back in the Matt Stafford days, the Lions offense did very little in that game. Seahawks offense didn't do much more. Russell Wilson, 20-26, 287 yards, 1 touchdown. He also rushed 6 times for 52 yards. Thomas Rawls had 17 carries for 48 yards. Russell Wilson was sacked 6 times in that game. And he fumbled 3 times, losing 2 of them. Thomas Rawls had 17 carries for 48 yards. Fred Jackson for the Seahawks back then. The leading receiver for the Seahawks was Jermaine Kearse, who had 2 catches for 84 yards. Tyler Lockett had 4 catches, but just for 58 yards. He also fumbled and lost that fumble. Ziggy Ansah for the Lions had 2 sacks in that game. Darryl Tapp, former Seahawk, had 1 sack. Jason Jones, a former Seahawk, had half a sack. The Seahawks had no sacks in that game. And they had 1, I don't think they had any. So the Lions had 1 turnover. The Seahawks had 3. Somehow the Seahawks managed to win that anyway. So point being, the Seahawks have won the last 5 games against the Lions. The last time they lost was 2012 in Detroit. That was a tough game. I remember that game where they lost 28-24. I'm pretty sure Zach Miller had a touchdown in that game. He did. It's a pretty sweet one, if I remember right. The Seahawks were leading in that game. They were up 17-7. And then we're even up 24-21 with 5 minutes left until Matthew Stafford led a game-winning touchdown drive with 20 seconds left on a pass to Titus Young to pull that one out. That was a rough one. Marshawn Lynch had 105 yards in that game and a touchdown. He had a 77-yard run in that game. Golden Tate had 7 catches for 64 yards. Sidney Rice had 6 catches for 55 yards. No Doug Baldwin in that game. Must have been hurt. Titus Young had 9 catches for 100 yards and 9 targets and 2 touchdowns. That is wild. Against that defense, can't believe that. This game happened when game happened early in the year. So 2012, everyone remembers that as such a breakout year. That was this game took the Seahawks to 4-4 at the time. They would then go on to win 7 of their last 8 games. So this game was kind of the last straw, so to speak. The real last straw was the loss to the Dolphins in week 12 that year, but still. Point being, the Seahawks have played particularly well against the Lions. Our guest Trey Brown had his pick 6 to end Jared Goff's streak of seasons without an interception. Let's see, is this? Yeah, we've got this already. Sorry, people are sending me stuff. So I guess this is my way of saying that the Seahawks, I think that that's certainly a tough game, but I don't know that that is, I mean, again, that's not the toughest possible game for the Seahawks to start out their season. And let's take another quick look, see if there's any new news. Would be we have if we could get the 49 Cardinals home schedule. Let's see. This guy's had a bunch of stuff. Let's see if this guy's got anything. All right. Yeah, we've got all this. Got all this. See if we can find the 49ers home schedule. So far, not seeing that. Let's see if we can get the Rams home schedule. You got to piecemeal these things together. Yeah, so far, I think what I'm showing you here is the latest. But getting back to the schedule, I think the Seahawks should expect, doesn't mean that they will. I think they should expect to beat the Broncos and the Patriots. I think the Dolphins is a push-it game, but it is in Seattle in the cold. This is early in the season. The Dolphins are not made for that kind of game. Across the country, different time zone. So I think that that's at least a close game. I wouldn't be surprised if, depending on how the first two games of the season go, the Seahawks could be favored in that one as well. They will not be favored against the Lions, nor should they be. But they've played well there. I guess that's a loss. Eventually, they got to lose to a good Lions team, but it's at least a question. It's not a sure loss. And as I think someone in the comment section said, Jeffrey Four, a member, said the Ravens and Mike Macdonald also really crushed Jared Goff and the Lions last year. And then you've got the Giants at home. That seems again a game that you should expect to win. Without being crazy, just like honestly what I expect from this team, assuming normal things happen, I would expect the Seahawks to win no fewer than 3 of their first 5 games. And I don't think it's crazy to think that they win 4 of those 5 games. That to me would be a crazy way to start. It would certainly get people excited. And then let's say for a second, let's just dream for a second that they win 4 of 5. They're 4-1. I don't think that's a crazy scenario. I really don't, with the way the schedule's set up. They'd be 4-1 facing the 49ers at home for Thursday Night Football. And I like the fact as well that they're going to be back-to-back home games. So they're going to have home for the Giants, and then they will welcome in the 49ers on 4 days rest. So they don't have to travel for that Thursday night game. That's as good as you could hope for. The 49ers will be coming off 4 days of rest, 3 days of rest. Let me see here if I can find. Do we have the 49ers week 5 schedule? Let me see if I can find that. Uh, 49ers. We also know that none of these games are going to be international, in case you didn't know that. So we don't know the 49ers week 5 game, unfortunately. That's too bad. In any event, I assume the 49ers, that probably a home game for the 49ers in week 5, but it would be great if it was an away game. So they'll have a chance to go up against the big bad 49ers, potentially with a 4-1 record, hosting them, not having to travel on short rest. Now, that didn't really help them last year, and I wouldn't assume that helps them this year, but who knows? We can dare to dream. And then I'd have to think week 7 is an away game. Let me take a look here. I think the games that we don't know that are away are Arizona, Rams, and 49ers. I doubt that they're going to be back-to-back with the 49ers in week 7. So they don't have any other divisional games until the Rams at home on in week 9. Could be the Cardinals, but here's what I'm guessing. I'm guessing week 7 is going to be at Atlanta. I'm guessing week 7 is going to be at Atlanta. In fact, I'm going to put that in there as a guess. So let's highlight that. I got to be able to get access to my controls here to do that. Can I color it without view more cell smart chips? No. No, I guess I can't. All right. Well, I'll just do this. That's well, for people that aren't paying attention, that's just a guess. It's not real. But I think that that would make some sense, that they would give them a long layover until they then travel cross country to the Falcons. Other options, I mean, it can't be the Jets, right? We've already got that on the schedule. So I think that's the Falcons, which would then leave the Rams, Cardinals, and 49ers here. I don't think this would be the Cardinals because I don't think they'd play the Cardinals back-to-back weeks. So I'm going to guess, this is going to be my next guess. I'm going to guess this is the San Francisco 49ers away. Let's see if I turn out to be right on any of these things. Let's spell guess right. Let's put another note here. Okay. And then I'm going to guess this is the Rams away. And I'm going to guess the last game of the season is, oops. Is the Cardinals. This is my guess. What do you guys think? Anything you'd guess differently? I want to welcome Hawkso as a new member of the YouTube channel. Thank you for joining, man. I really, really appreciate it. The link is pinned in chat. It's also in the description of the video. You too can join now as a YouTube member. And we're 20 minutes away, guys. I've already been on for almost an hour. We're 20 minutes away from Tom Nguyen joining us to talk about Mike Macdonald and this amazing article that he wrote. So we'll do a hard transition to talking about that. I got a question of what made me guess week 10 versus week 11. Just, I think earlier. I mean, there's not, I don't know that, what did I say? Which when did I say Tom? I used to manage a guy named Tom Nguyen. So let's hope I get Ted's name correct when I introduce him. Yes, of The Athletic. There's definitely a chance. Thank you, Ryan. Woo, I'm glad I said that now and not when he comes on. I had a great product director that reported to me named Tom Nguyen. But anyway, it's Ted Lasso, Ted Nguyen. All right. Anyway, there's definitely a chance that this could be the Rams in week 18. It could be the 49ers in week 18. I would guess the reason, I don't think most people think that the Seahawks are contenders for anything. So having them play the 49ers in week 18 would seem a little anticlimactic for the NFL. I'm guessing that they might have the 49ers and the Rams playing in week 18. That's why I think that the Cardinals make more sense. They've also played the Cardinals a lot in those late season games. And so if you imagine, they like to have the last week be a divisional game because it can decide the division. It's more likely teams will have to play their real players. And so I think the Rams and 49ers is a good bet for week 18. Just a guess, but that's my thought. If I look at what we know about the Rams schedule so far, they play at San Francisco in week 15. So the 49ers could host the Rams in week 18. It'd be a little bit late. The Cardinals, it looks like we don't know much about the Cardinals schedule for some reason. At least what the views that I'm getting. I don't have almost any details about the Cardinals schedule. What do we know about the San Francisco schedule? They play Detroit on Monday Night Football in week 17. They open against the Jets on Monday Night Football in week 1. After their Thursday night game with Kansas City or with Seattle in week 6, they then host the Chiefs. I love that. Let's give the 49ers a tough schedule if we can. Then they host the Cowboys on Sunday Night Football. It's a rough go. So there'll be Thursday Night Football in Seattle, then home for the Chiefs, and then home for the Cowboys. We know that they play Buffalo at Buffalo in week 13. The Rams at home in week 15. So they'd have to be on the road against the Rams in week 18 if that's where it was played. And then the 49ers play the Lions in week 17 at home. Yeah, so I feel pretty good about my guesses. I think I'm going to be right. I'm going to go ahead and post this and I'm going to call it. I'm going to post this on Twitter. We'll see if I turn out to be right. Because you got to call your shots, folks. So we got a question here from Super Sauce XL. Do they ever play the same team in the last week as the previous year? Can't remember a time when they did, but I could be wrong. Oh, I don't know, man. Let's do a quick look. They played against in Arizona, the last game of the season, so many times. I'm going to find this for you real quick. We got about 13 minutes till Ted Nguyen joins. All right. It is going to be span of games. This is going to be last game of the season. Game number. Okay. I have to double check. It's going to be a little complicated because it's now a 17-game season, so it's a little harder to pinpoint, but that's fine. Seahawks, opponent, Arizona Cardinals, location, away. All right. I'll do a little sleuthing for you in real time for Supersauce XL because you're a YouTube member, and I appreciate the support. Let's sort by date and rerun that. All right, so they ended last year in Arizona. They ended the 2022 season in Arizona. They ended the 2016 season, the 2012 season, and the 2008 season in Arizona. So it's happened 5 times. It's happened 2 times in the last 3 seasons. So, I mean, if we want to play around, you could say you could put, I mean, you could move the bye week. Maybe the bye week's week 7. It's possible. And then you'd maybe say maybe the Cardinals game is week 10 at Arizona. That would then maybe push either the Rams, push the Rams game. I don't think they're going to play the 49ers the last week of the season. It's possible, but it's just a guess. I don't think so. I don't think it makes sense that they would play the Falcons in the last week of the season. I think it's going to be a divisional game. It usually is. Let's look at the Seahawks past few seasons, all right? So last year they ended with a division game. 2022, they ended with a division game against the Rams. 2021, they ended with the Cardinals, division game. 2020, they ended with the 49ers, a divisional game. Well, if you go by this, 49ers, Rams, Cardinals, it would be time for them to have 49ers as the last game of the season. Just by the way that this is going, let's see if that's a pattern as well. 2019, they ended with the 49ers. So 2 years in a row, they ended with the 49ers, 2019, 2020. But every time it's a divisional. Then 2018, Cardinals. I mean, it's just a divisional game every time. So that there's just no way that the final game of the season is going to be the Falcons. And we have seen them play the same team back to back in the last game of the season, back to back seasons. If I'm this, I guess if I'm the league, I would want the 49ers playing the Rams in week 18. Those are the two prominent division competitors that could be for the division. Just makes too much sense. And if that's the case, then the Seahawks have to play the Cardinals in week 18. And then the rest of these things, are a little more fungible. Do I think that they're not going to play the 49ers back to back here in week 7? So that could be the Rams. It can't be the Cardinals because we've already decided it has to be the Cardinals in week 18. And then so really, I guess it could either be the Rams. It could be the Rams or the Falcons here. And I mean, 2 back-to-back divisional games could make sense. Going from a Thursday night game to a Rams away game, that could also make sense. I could actually be talked into that because that's less travel after a Thursday night game. It keeps them on the West Coast. That's a decent possibility. If you flip the Rams and the Falcons, what would that look like? Then you'd get the challenge there is you like at least for the Seahawks is you go across the country to the Jets and then you go back and then you go back across the country to the Falcons. So that would be a little bit of a tough back to back if they did that from a travel perspective. Not that the NFL's ever cared about that. It would set up better for the Seahawks if this was the way things set up. I mean, even regardless, you're talking about 4 of 5 home games in this stretch from week 5 to week 9. And you are talking about this back half of the year getting more away games, 3 out of 4 away games in this stretch, and then ending the season with 2 away games. So yeah, I think I'm a, I feel pretty good about my guesses here. I feel pretty good about my guesses here. I think I give myself pretty good odds. Let me check in with Ted, make sure he's got what he needs. And we're going to start transitioning the conversation, folks. I'll come back to this. But that was fun. We're going to have more fun later today. Says Softy says switch 14 and 18. Let's see if I can find it. Softy talking to me. We'll see. We'll find out. Anyway, we're going to switch gears here, folks, and talk about our new head coach, Mike Macdonald, who's going to be the one leading us, guiding us through this schedule. If you have not read Ted Nguyen's article, I highly recommend it. Let me make sure I get his. Sorry, in the process of doing something, I forgot what I was doing. All right. Let me find his article. And I'll post a link to it in chat here. So this is a link to the article. Am I spelling that right? Nguyen. Yeah. So this is really a must read. Published in the New York Times, a great article from Ted. And I have a ton of questions for him about this article. And he really goes into detail about some of the differences and what is making Mike Macdonald and his defense kind of stand out from others in the league. And so I wanted to bring him on, get some additional insight in that conversation, and share some of those things that he's hearing from people across the league. Some of these things are, sources that he's got. There's other defensive coordinators, other offensive coordinators, and just a lot of interesting pieces to how they have played. I am going to open image, new tab. Yeah, so I want to talk through a couple of the things that he brought up and share some insights there. And I also want to talk about how he thinks it translates for this Seattle Seahawks team. And he talks about Mike Macdonald being the Sean McVay of defense. I think that's pretty high praise. Softy's harassing me. I'm going to send him a text. So yeah, we'll have Ted on and we'll talk through this, learn a little bit about Mr. Mike Macdonald's defense, and then don't forget that tonight, and it might change. So if you're not already liked and subscribed and clicking the bell, um, if you're not already clicking the bell to get notified when we're going live, you should. That's how you'll know. All right, so I am getting some new news. Based off what I'm hearing, I'm going to switch it out. It is now, I'm going to put in Rams here, and I'm going to put in Cardinals here. Okay. So that is the new bet. I think that's an odd decision by the NFL. And like I said, I think it makes more sense for the Rams to be playing the 49ers in week 18, but so be it. So we now have a little bit better idea. I think that pretty much locks it in. I think the Falcons are going to, we know the 49ers are not going to be week 7. That's got to be the Falcons now. And now that we know the Cardinals are going to be week 14, then we've got the schedule. We've got the full schedule. So that's going to be interesting to break down further. Interesting to break down further when we get out. Let me tweet this out while we wait for Ted to join. The Seahawks 2024 full schedule. Here we go. All right. Further, I mean, I think that when we welcome Ted in, if you guys have questions you think I should ask, let me know. I don't know if I'll be able to get them all in, but here we are, excited to add to the show. I think one of the guys doing some of the best work out there on NFL analysis, especially around the film room. He is a staff writer for The Athletic on the NFL. He has his Twitter handle is not his name. So if you're looking for him on Twitter and you're not finding that, it is FB_. He's an underscore guy, just like Josh Cashman. He's an underscore guy. FB_ film analysis. Ted Nguyen joins us now to talk about what I think was one of the best articles I've read this offseason, especially as it pertains to our new head coach in Seattle, Mike Macdonald. Ted, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on, man.
No problem. Thanks for having me on and the kind intro.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Before we get into your article and some of the implications of that article, I always love to hear just a little bit about you. How did you get started doing what you do?
Well, I coached football when I was in college, and I coached a little bit of high school football after I graduated. But I really didn't like the teaching aspect of it, because if you had to, if you wanted to be a coach, you had to be a high school teacher, and I just did not like the teaching part of it. Kids are just so it's I was teaching PE and English, and it's so hard to get kids to run and do laps nowadays. And I was just looking forward to coaching, and I was doing a blog for fun about the Raiders, and that blog kind of picked up, and then a lot of people started reading it, and then one thing led to another, and the Athletic gave me a call and gave me a chance to write professionally, and I kind of just jumped head in, and it's been a fun journey. 5 years later, I'm still able to do it.
Yeah, I mean, not a lot of people get to make that transition. Is that something that, people think about that as a dream job? Other people are like, well, wait till you do it before you decide if it's a dream job. How has it been for you transitioning to being, a professional journalist?
It's been awesome. Like it's a dream job, and I still can't believe I'm able to write about sports for a living and go to games and talk to coaches and players and all those things. And I gave you the very short version, but it was definitely a grind and a long journey. And it was tough. Like there were a 2 year period where I was writing articles for like $20, so it was it definitely wasn't an overnight thing.
Ted, before we I have specific questions about this article you wrote about Mike Macdonald, but before we even get into those, I'm curious how did you decide to get into this article? Like, what this topic in general? Was it Mike Macdonald? Was it something you saw? Was it something you were asked to do? Just kind of curious how you came to do this article in the first place.
Yeah, I've been interested in Mike Macdonald as a coach since he was hired back to the Ravens after his stint at Michigan. I just always heard really good things about him as a coach, just really good things about him as a teacher of the game, and how he kind of is able to systematically um, break things down and just kind of put together a system where he could be flexible and really keep in mind how the players, I think a lot of coaches preach or talk about how they have the players in mind when they put together a system. But I think McDonald really has that in the forefront of how he installs and how he organizes his defense. And I talked about it in an article about the unique ways of how he teaches a defense and how it lends to being flexible on game day.
Were you surprised to hear he was becoming a head coach? Do you think that was something that made a lot of sense, that his skills translate to being a head coach? A lot of folks kind of assume all coordinators can be head coaches, but that's obviously not the case. It's a different job. Any thoughts about when you heard that was going to happen for him?
I wasn't surprised that he was going to be a head coach. I mean, like I said, I've heard a lot of good things about him for the past couple of years, and with the success the Ravens were having. I mean, they were always a good defense, but just how good they were last year, leading in every major statistic, including DVOA. It wasn't surprising that he became a head coach, and I do think that his skills lend to being a head coach. I think there are times when there are coordinators that are very good at scheming one side of the ball that might not have all the skills you need to be a head coach, but just the fact that one of his best attributes is being a teacher and just rethinking how to organize things in a way that is player friendly. I think you could apply that philosophy to not just all sides of the ball, including offense and special teams, but just as an organization. So I think just being able to think through your players' eyes, your employees, and all those things, and just having the creativity to rethink things lends itself to being a really good head coach.
We're talking to Ted Nguyen, staff writer for The Athletic. Ted, one of the things I love when I sit down to write an article, especially about NFL, is I don't know. I don't know the answers to some of the questions I have going in, and then when I find them, it's kind of a rejuvenating in some way. And I'm curious, what are some things that you learned in the process of writing this article that maybe you didn't before you started?
I think just learning about how defenses are taught and how um, just some of the language around defense and so some of the rigid ways that it's taught throughout the league, and I think a lot of that just has to do with This is how I learned it, so this is how I'm going to teach it. And just kind of getting into that world, learning how defenses are taught, learning how it's being called, and kind of the limitations to that, and how McDonald has kind of rethink things to make it a little bit more flexible and interchangeable, was really interesting because like you could look at how you could look at different defenses, you could look at different schemes on film and on paper, but just kind of getting a peek behind the curtains of how it's actually being installed, I thought was pretty interesting.
Yeah, you said at some point in your article, quote, instead of learning pressures attached to fronts, McDonald teaches his players pressure patterns so they know each other's jobs and how to execute different pressures from different fronts. Is that one of the things you're kind of referring to in a difference in terms of the flexibility of how he teaches?
Yeah, so typically defenses will learn their blitzes or pressure packages from fronts. So when we talk about fronts, we're talking about how the defense lines up. So if you hear tight front, then the defensive tackles are supposed to line up, head up on a tackle. The nose tackle is supposed to be head up on a center, and then you learn your pressures from a tight front. And it kind of makes sense, right? Because you're learning. I need to go like shoot the B gap lined up from the tackle, and if I'm a linebacker, I have to go like loop around to the C gap on this pressure. So the front and pressure tells you where I need to line up and where I need to go. But McDonald kind of differs. He doesn't. He teaches pressure patterns. So he's teaching in this pressure. I have a player going to this gap. I have a player looping around to this gap. And everybody kind of knows each other's jobs. And one of the ways that he installs it, I didn't talk about this in an article. Let's say he'll split the defense into 4 different groups during practice. So one group is learning one pressure, and the second group is learning another pressure. The third group is learning a third pressure, and the fourth group is learning a fourth pressure. And these groups are doing nothing but working on this one pressure, and they're learning the pressure pattern. They're learning, they're jumping around in different spots, and they're learning how to run this pressure from this different spot. And they're just switching up fronts, but they're just running the same pressure over and over again. And then they'll switch groups, and they'll learn a different pressure, and then they'll do the same thing. So that way, they're just kind of learning what each other are doing. And then if you want to change the front, or you want to switch a player in different positions, the pressure pattern. So, if I'm in this area, then I'm doing this. And I know if he's doing this, then I'm doing that kind of thing. And then you just kind of switch things up and be very flexible because everybody kind of knows each other's jobs.
That's fascinating. So if I'm understanding you correctly, part of this is, instead of, hey, here's the front, here's how the defensive line is going to be set up, and here's where the linebackers are going to be, and this is the pressure based off of that. There's these patterns that he's creating. So I think you talk about this in the article, and I don't know why you had to humiliate the Seahawks by showing all the week 9 pressures that they had against the Seahawks, and our center tripping our left guard. It was not a good game for us that week, Ted. But anyway, but you showed that interestingly in the article that it was the same pressure, but coming from essentially from a different front. And so, someone was responsible for taking the center to one direction so that another player could pin the guard and the third player could come in and have an opening. But
Mm-hmm.
which players were doing that was different. Which front they were doing it from was different, but the pattern of that pressure was the same. Is that what you're getting at?
Yes, exactly. So in the article, I just showed one of McDonald's favorite types of pressure, which is this pick stunt in which the linebacker picks off the guard for a defensive tackle to loop around. And I showed it from 3 different fronts, and in those fronts, players have different jobs. So every player in the defense kind of knows what they're doing in that pattern, and then you're just able to switch things around. And it's the same pressure for the defense. They're just learning this one pressure, but they're doing it from different presentations. So for the offense, it looks like three different pressures, three different groups of players doing different things, and that's very hard to prepare for a defense, for an offense. Whereas on a defense, they notice pressures. That's one thing that they've learned, and they're just switching where they line up, and that's very tough for an offense to prepare for.
Yeah, you talked about that later in the article, and I want to see if I can find where it was, but that it essentially that offenses have keys that they're reading,
Hmm.
and that by having this kind of flexibility and unpredictability, it makes it hard to say, okay, well, I'm calling out who the mic is and I'm calling out where this is, but I don't really know at this point. It's harder for offenses to actually prepare to know what their keys are. Is that, first of all, am I reading that right? And if so, it feels like every defense would want that. Why is this really just something that's just emerging with Mike Macdonald? Is it something that's other defenses are going to start to have available to them as well?
Yeah, you're reading that right. So I think there are some offenses that will look at fronts. They'll look at, all right, in over front, we should be expecting this pressure A, B, C, D. From under front, we should be expecting these three pressures. But um, because they're able to just switch up the fronts of pressures, they can't really prepare for that. So let's say one week the Ravens are running one pressure from one front, and then the next week they're running that same pressure, but they're running from a different front. It's tough for an offense to prepare for, especially the quarterback who's trying to find as many clues and tells as possible. It's hard for them to do that. And I think typically, like we talked about, these pressures are attached to fronts. So offenses can get those tells. But with the McDonald system and the way he teaches it, um, they're able to switch things around. And there's going to be 5 different teams that run that system next year because a bunch of McDonald's assistants were hired around the league. You have Jesse Minter coming to the Chargers, going to be running the same system. So they're going to be teaching it the same way. So the system and the scheme isn't particularly unique. A lot of his pressures and blitzes he actually learned from Wink Martindale and Dean Pease, who he worked for in Baltimore. He's doing it a little different. He's running a lot of these pressures from two high looks, which means there's 2 deep safeties instead of 1 high looks, which Martindale and Pease did. So there's a little bit of that, a little bit of Fangio influence where you have the safeties stemming and disguising before the snap too. But I think as a way of teaching it, it's different, and we're going to have a few different teams teach it the same way as McDonald, and we'll see if they could reach that level of flexibility that the Ravens reached last year. But it's a way of teaching, and it's a different way of organizing defense, which is what he did as his assistant coach with Dean Pease and Wink Martindale. Is he helped to streamline and organize the defense to make it more teachable. So you have a very multiple defense, but the main thing is you need to have your players be able to execute and play fast at the same time, and that's what McDonald did, and that's what those assistants are going to try to replicate throughout the league. So we'll see if he could do it. I mean, it's a different type of influence on a league. Like when you had the Seattle cover 3 guys, it was a very specific type of scheme that everybody was copying around. And then with the Fangio's tree branching out, it's a very specific scheme that was branching out. But with McDonald, it's not a scheme per se. It's not like a one coverage they run a lot or one type of blitz they run a lot. It's a way of teaching the defense, and you can apply different schemes within that system. So we'll see if that's more replicable than what we've seen in the past with some of these other defensive trees.
Yeah, you talked about that in the article as well, that one of the things that was a hallmark of McDonald's defense was that it was different week to week, and that it was hard, they couldn't necessarily pin it down. That kind of begs this question, and you mentioned the Pete Carroll's cover 3, or the one that he made famous in Seattle, obviously had been made famous by others that he talked about in his lineage. He's talking about Vic Fangio. Those are two cases where other teams haven't really necessarily been able to replicate that well. And
Mm-hmm.
how much do you think Mike Macdonald's going to be able to bring his excellence to the Seahawks and improve their defense? And part of it will be his excellence as a coach and a play caller, not just a designer of game plans, versus you have to have the players, like the specific players, to run it. And it's more like, all these other teams trying it are going to struggle because they don't have Mike Macdonald and maybe they don't have the players. So between those different aspects, what do you think? What do you think Mike Macdonald's going to be able to bring with him to Seattle?
Yeah, I think his way of organizing and teaching could be applied to offense as well, and to special teams as well. So I think just being able to reorganize how you want to teach things and how you want to think through how to call plays, and I think he's willing to reorganize and kind of rethink how football is typically taught with terminology and just teaching that you can apply that to anything. And just being a great teacher and understanding how the players see things, to me, is one of his greatest qualities. And I think that's a quality a head coach has to have. So I think uh, that would make me more excited about Macdonald than just being a guy with a kind of a funky scheme that kind of took over the league.
This is Ted Nguyen from The Athletic. Thank you for joining us. We have a couple more things just to love to talk to you about with the article that you wrote about Mike Macdonald. I'm curious. There's folks that say that Mike Macdonald's defense clicked in when Roquan Smith was acquired, and that this is essentially like people give more credit to Roquan Smith acquisition than they do to Mike Macdonald. And generally, I think that folks look at it and they're like, hey, Baltimore had all pros at every level of that
Mm-hmm.
defense. Seahawks don't. I'm curious, though, when you look at the Seahawks and you talk about Byron Murphy and Leonard Williams and you bring in Devin Witherspoon and some of these other guys, are there things that you can imagine that he has in Seattle that maybe he didn't have in Baltimore, that might either change the way he approaches things or enhance his approach to defense?
I mean, I think Roquan Smith is great, and the defense definitely took a turn when he was traded there. But I think one of the most important players he had was Kyle Hamilton, because he was just able to do everything as far as cover a wide receiver one-on-one or play linebacker, even a box even. But he was just so versatile, and finding a player to do that is going to be a challenge for the Seahawks. And maybe that's Devin Witherspoon. Maybe that's someone else that we haven't heard of yet. But finding a player that can do that is going to be difficult. I think there are some potential guys on the defensive line that could be very good. But I think what this scheme does is it makes the defensive line talent a little less important. It's more you need very strong coverage guys, and then we could kind of manufacture pressure with our scheme. He doesn't blitz a lot. They were 22nd in blitz rate, which is bringing 5 defenders in the last couple of years. A lot of the pressure that gets created is because of simulated pressures, which are pressures in which you're just rushing 4, but you have a rusher or 1 or 2 rushers coming from a second and third level, and you're having a defensive line drop. You're gonna, with the Seahawks, you might not be used to seeing, Jaron Reed or somebody like that drop, but get used to seeing it because defensive linemen are going to have to drop in this scheme. So I think just really shoring up the coverage unit is going to be important, but it's definitely going to be different not having that caliber of player on every level like the Ravens did. So I don't expect the Seahawks to all of a sudden become a top 5 defense overnight, but I do expect them to be better. One of the things that offensive coordinators told me when they were preparing for the Ravens is this system really tests all the rules of our offense, and it kind of simplifies our offense because there's so many things they do. So I think schematically you're going to have to upgrade, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the Seahawks are also all of a sudden going to be a top 5 team. I think they're going to be a better team, and as they kind of grow with Macdonald, that roster grows, and you add better personnel, then that defense is going to test being elite. But there is going to be a drop off, you know, with the coming to the Seahawks from the Ravens. They're not going to. The Seahawks aren't all of a sudden going to be a top 5 type of defense. I think you just expect them to be a defense that really challenges offenses as far as their rules, and just seeing improvement throughout the year is going to be a key factor.
I don't know how familiar you are with the Seahawks personnel on defense, so feel free to just bow out if not. But I'm curious, when you look at that side of the ball, is there a player that stands out to you, or players that you can imagine really being helped out the most by Mike Macdonald coming in? It could be linebackers, Jerome Baker, Tyrell Dodson that they signed. It could be Leonard Williams, Byron Murphy. You talked about Jaron Reed, Witherspoon, and so on and so forth. I'm curious if there's any guys that you're like, wow, McDonald's going to do something special with that guy.
Witherspoon, I think, is the player I'm most excited to see in this scheme, because I think, he is undersized, but he's so physical, and I think he is versatile, and I think that's a player that McDonald's going to move around and really put a lot of trust in his first year. And I was a big Draymond Jones guy when he was a free agent, so I'm curious to see how he plays in a scheme like this, where he's going to be able to stunt and he's going to get picks set for him. So I would expect him to get a nice numbers boost. I don't know who it's going to be. I mean, Matt Buke was that guy with the Ravens where he was getting stuff schemed up for him, and his numbers took a huge leap because of the scheme. So I'm curious to see who that defensive lineman is going to be in the Seahawks scheme. I think it's going to be Draymond Jones, but it could very well be Byron Murphy. But to me, Draymond Jones is a very versatile guy to go inside, outside, and to me, that's a player that's easy to really scheme things up for in this type of system.
That's interesting. I remember you talking about Draymond Jones when he was a free agent. What is it about Draymond Jones? You talked about his versatility. What do you like about him?
I just like how violent he is. Really, I like defensive linemen that just kind of have that edge to them, and I think he has that. And again, I like the versatility of being able to play an edge or go inside. So we've seen a lot of defensive linemen get a little nice numbers boost when they go into system. You see Kyle Van Noy play really good ball. You see Jadeveon Clowney have the best year of his career. I don't know what his like 8th season. He has a breakout season, his 8th season playing in a system. So I see Draymond Jones as a similar player to Jadeveon Clowney. Obviously, there are differences, but they're very physical, bigger defensive ends. So I could see Draymond Jones playing really well in this type of system.
On the flip side, Ted, there's been some questions raised about cornerbacks and what Mike Macdonald will expect of them and how physical they need to be in supporting the run and things of that nature. And a guy like Tariq Woolen, and whether or not he would be able to fit with a Mike Macdonald defense. I'm kind of curious if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of followed along with Tariq Woolen. I was very excited for him coming into the second year, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm not very familiar about what happened with him last season, why he was benched, and kind of the up and down nature of his season. So I think you probably have to fill me in on what happened with Tyreek Woolen last year.
Yeah, it's really for him. It was more just run defense, and there's a little bit of an injury issue, but his tackling was poor, and so that's why I think the question more generally is how much are cornerbacks expected in Mike Macdonald's defense to be a big part of defending the run game. And if you have any insights there, if you don't, that's totally fine as well. And then I got one more question. I'll let you run, but
Yeah, I think in any system, and anytime you have a defensive-minded head coach, there's going to be a certain level of tackling expected from cornerbacks, and I think that wasn't a problem in Baltimore where they had very physical corners.
Right.
So yeah, Woolen's going to be attached. He's going to be expected to tackle, but it's not like this is going to be a cover two type of system where corner is going to have outside force and have to come up on the run very, very often. But I mean, he's going to have to be better. If it was so bad that he got benched, then it's going to be an issue that he has to work on. And I mean, he definitely has the size to be able to do it. So hopefully he's able to shore that up. But like I said, it's a very coverage orientated defense where you have to have good coverage on a back end, and then you could kind of create pressure on the front end with the scheme. So hopefully Williams able to get those issues corrected because his ability to cover is going to be very important for the system to work.
I wanted to ask, not related to your article, but just given that you've done a lot of analysis, watched film, and looked at schemes, wondering if you've looked on the other side of the ball at all for the Seahawks with Ryan Grubb and what he did at University of Washington, and any thoughts or any whispers you've heard about the Seahawks' new OC and what kind of scheme he might bring to the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, I've been watching Grubb's scheme for a long time at Washington. I always thought that this was a pro type of scheme, so I wasn't surprised that he took that leap. I was, maybe a little surprised at how it happened and at how quickly it happened. But he is a very, in college he wasn't running like a ton of zone read and a ton of option types of plays. A lot of his best stuff was in a drop back game and being able and just running it out different formations and kind of just switching things up. Um, kind of like McDonald does, where like you're running the same concept, but he does it in a creative type of ways. And I like that he's very aggressive as far as throwing the ball downfield. I think he has some great receivers there, and obviously Michael Penix is a great quarterback as throwing the ball downfield. But I think Geno Smith can throw the ball downfield too, and obviously you have a couple big time or a few big time weapons in Seattle. So I think it's going to be an aggressive throw the ball downfield type scheme. You're going to see a lot of motion, a lot of different formations. So I'm excited to see Grubb as well. So the Seahawks are definitely going to be a team that I'm watching. As a guy that really loves schemes and creative coaching.
I lied. One more thing. So you mentioned Geno. I'm just curious. There's polarizing perspectives on Geno around. I'm curious what your thoughts are independently about Geno Smith.
Yeah, I think Geno kind of gets compared with some of the elite quarterbacks out there. I don't think he's a top 5 type, top 7 type of quarterback, but I think he's very, very good. He's accurate throwing the ball downfield. He can move in a pocket, and he's really good at making checks at the line of scrimmage. I just think he's a very good quarterback, and of course, one day you want to make that if you are able to swing a trade or be able to get a top prospect type of quarterback, go get him. But I think for now, it's hard to get better than what Geno Smith brings you as a quarterback. So I'm a fan. Like maybe it was just because I was watching all these like college prospects for months, but like the first film I started watching was a Seahawks film. I'm like, damn, Geno does a lot of good things, So I wouldn't blame him for I wouldn't make him a scapegoat for the offense. I just think he's a very good, solid quarterback, and that's hard to upgrade from.
I appreciate that, Ted. Ted, thank you so much for coming on the show and talking about your article. Is there anything else that I didn't ask you about that you think Seahawks fans should know, either about Mike Macdonald or anything you've learned about the team?
No, I think that's it for now. I am writing about how there's this big influx of college coaches coming up into the NFL this year, and Ryan Grubb is one of those guys. So be on the lookout for that article.
Awesome. Ted, where can they find you if they want to learn more about what you're writing and all your content?
My Twitter is FB_film analysis, like you mentioned. I have a YouTube channel, Ted Nguyen NFL. If you want to check that out, I'm gonna try to do little tutorials on my YouTube channel. And of course, you can find my articles on The Athletic.
Awesome. That's Ted Nguyen joining us from The Athletic. A great article. I pinned it in, or I put it in the chat. You can access it. I highly recommend it. Ted, thanks so much for joining. Hope you have a great rest of your day.
No problem. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Take care. That's Ted Nguyen from The Athletic. Great to catch up with him. I thought a ton of great info in there. And I hope you learned a little bit. I think this notion of pressure patterns is going to be a big deal and something that we should all be paying attention to. I thought that insight that he shared about the way that Mike Macdonald organizes his practices, where he has 4 different groups on defense, all learning different pressures. So you have 4 groups, you have 4 different pressures, and then they're practicing that same pressure from different fronts and different looks. So you can imagine kind of stations. Anyone that's been part of a sports practice or been a coach or a player or anything like that, you can imagine these stations where you've got different groups of personnel learning the way that this pressure will work. One pressure, but from a number of different looks. And then you can imagine them rotating either that day or future days, whatever, to another pressure and learning, okay, here's what I do in this situation. Here's how this works. And learning it, we've heard it if you heard the Trey Brown interview I did last week, Trey was starting to talk about how that's already starting to show up. He now understands what the defensive front, and what the defensive lineman responsibilities are, what the linebackers, safety. So he sees the bigger picture about what the pressure is trying to accomplish, and he understands his role in it better. And so you can imagine these different stations, these different pressures, and then being able to execute it from different looks and with different personnel. That's a big deal. That's a big deal. And I think that's a really cool concept that feels innovative in a really cool way, because innovating on how you teach something, there's a lot of history that demonstrates that if you can find a new way to teach something that sticks better, that is retained better, that is highly valuable, and it allows you to actually teach more, but it will feel like it's simpler. And there's a lot of evidence building that is Mike Macdonald's superpower. You even heard Ted talk about the fact that he thinks his teaching technique has applicability on offense and special teams. And if he can bring that to other parts of the way the teams operates, I just got even more excited about the coach that was my number one choice for the Seahawks to hire anyway. This is a guy that, Ted in his article talked about as the Sean McVay of defense, and how he's able to simplify looks so that people don't know on the other side what's coming, but also now how he teaches it. I think that's great. I want to take a second to recognize another YouTube member, Detail Oriented. Thank you for joining. So happy to have you. You can join as a YouTube member as well. The link is pinned in the chat. It's in the description of the video. And if you're getting most of this content through YouTube, I highly recommend you join as a YouTube member. It's more fun. You get access to the custom emojis. I'll know when you make comments or ask questions. I'll be able to answer. If you're a club level member, you can ask questions during the show, and I'll do my best to answer those. If you're a suite level member, we have some members only shows that we'll do, and we'll certainly try to continue that stuff. You can also join as a patron, patreon.com/hawkblogger. That is the only way to get the audio versions of this podcast as of now. So patreon.com/hawkblogger. Plus you get access to the Slack channel where the conversation is just popping all the time. Seahawks, Mariners, whatever, it's going on there, and it's great. So highly recommend you do that. If nothing else, give the show a like and click subscribe. Would appreciate that. Yeah, I thought that Ted seemed very positive. Ted's a pretty even-keeled dude, but pretty positive about what Mike Macdonald brings to the table, and had heard things that indicated that this is a guy that a lot of people find pretty appealing as a coach. And one of the things that I kind of walk away with after having read the article a couple of times and then talking with Ted, I don't know. I'll be really interested to see how many people can pull off what he's pulled off. I think that he's the key. I don't think it's the scheme. I don't think it's something that he can just pass along. Maybe it is. Maybe it is. I mean, we'll see. But I think he is incredibly bright. I think he's innovative. I think he sees things differently and with fresh eyes. And I don't think it's as simple as the scheme, and I don't think it's as simple as the teaching method, although those are great. I think it's also his ability to process in real time and make adjustments. I think it's also his ability to game plan and see things differently than other coaches do and prepare game plans that are more effective to begin with. And if you can if you can pair solid game planning with elite adjustments being made. Let's try that one more time. If you compare solid game planning with elite adjustments being made in game, then you're getting as much as you possibly can from a coach. Doesn't guarantee that you're going to win a Super Bowl, but it does help to say that your team's going to be in the best position it can be every week to win. And I think that's exciting. I think it's exciting. I'm looking forward to seeing what Mike Macdonald can do with these guys. You heard Ted talk about Devin Witherspoon being a guy that he's really eager to see what he can do. He talked about how Kyle Hamilton was really the key to that defense, that he can cover receiver, he can blitz, he can even play some linebacker. The difference between Kyle Hamilton and Devin Witherspoon is really how much Devin Witherspoon can handle being in the box, and can his body hold up to that? That's really the question. Otherwise, Devin Witherspoon, I think he's got every bit the talent that Kyle Hamilton has. And I think he is, we talked about it when we went through some of the grades for him. When I went through the cornerback show that I did last week, Devin Witherspoon is equally as good defending the run as he is defending the pass. And he is elite at blitzing. He's one of the best blitzers. So I think there's a lot of reason to think that Devin Witherspoon is going to be able to handle some of those Kyle Hamilton duties and maybe a little bit different. I also think it was interesting how much Ted talked about Draymond Jones and how similar he thinks Draymond Jones is to Jadeveon Clowney, which then connects another dot for us. This is what we do on Hawk Blogger Mornings. We obsess to the point of talking about this team every single day. For now, I think it's 52 straight days. We know that the Seahawks are asking Draymond Jones to train as an outside linebacker. And I think that could mean him dropping to Jadeveon Clowney level weight, which is around 267, 270. Draymond Jones typically plays at 280. Can he get down close to 270? I think hopefully. We'll see. And if he can be a physical, rough edge defender against the run and then be effective also in stunts and other things that get him to the quarterback. Look, we've all, I think, essentially, I don't think we've written off Draymond Jones, but I think we've talked about Draymond Jones as, disappointing when he signed the big deal. And I don't think he will probably ever be worth $17.5 million. What I do think is that the Seahawks may now have 3 dynamic athletes on the line that they didn't have at least for a full season under Pete Carroll. I think having Leonard Williams and Byron Murphy and Draymond Jones could be the makings of a very physical, tough front. And that doesn't even include Jaron Reed. It doesn't include Mike Morris. It doesn't include Jonathan Hankins and other guys. And it doesn't include Uchenna Nwosu, who's also a physical player. I'm excited to see Uchenna Nwosu finally get to play with guys that are maybe as physical and high effort as he is. I felt like he stood out last year in that regard. A couple comments I want to get to. Plenipote says, great show once again. Thank you for being a member and thank you for the comment. Jeffrey Four says, Macdonald was essentially handpicked by both Harbaughs. The more I learn about him, the more optimistic I feel. Feel the same way, Jeffrey, and thanks for being a member. Plenipote again says, in-game adjustments are something I'm really looking forward to. No kidding, right? I mean, it's been very frustrating. It used to be something I was very proud of and excited about as a Seahawks fan when Pete Carroll, I felt like they'd go into halftime and whatever was going on, they were going to correct it. They had a unique ability to do that in the early part. Maybe some of it's the players, right? Like maybe players are able to take the adjustments and actually bring them out on the field differently when you've got some of the smarter players that the Seahawks had, Richard Sherman and Doug Baldwin and all those guys that were super smart. Maybe they haven't had the right players to enact those adjustments, but it's felt like for a good 10 years, the Seahawks have not been good at adjusting. Shane Waldron, I was telling Robert Mays the other day, I think that's one of his weak points is I don't think Shane Waldron, if his game plan that he comes in with does not work, the Seahawks were cooked on offense. He almost never made adjustments that then opened things up. That was at least my recollection. I'd have to go back and see if that was true, but yeah, I think it'd be really great to come back and see that that's something that changes. Ryan Cleveland says, it's like Fangio. Lots of people run his stuff, but with subpar results. Yes, that's exactly right. We saw Gus Bradley leave and take Pete's system, and it never worked out that well. Dan Quinn ended up having to switch things. And then a super chat here from Taker610. Thank you for the super chat. Thoughts on an 18-game regular season too much? Well, I don't know if it even matters. I mean, it certainly doesn't matter what I think. They're going to go to 18 games. It's coming. It's a sure thing. And personally, I would have preferred things to stay at a 16-game schedule. I think the quality of play is better. I think the teams need a little bit more and the players need a little bit more time. If I could change one thing about the NFL, just one thing, I think the top thing that comes to mind is to allow more practicing in pads than that they do. Just to revert to the amount of practicing in pads they used to be able to do, because I think that that's really deteriorated the level of play among the offensive lines, especially. And I think it's led to an inferior quality of game. But the reason I'm bringing that up relative to the 18-game schedule is I just think if you're not going to be able to have pads that often, I would rather at least have a longer preseason so that the teams have a longer time to have a chance to get up to speed and be ready to play high-quality football. But, 18 games. As a season ticket holder since 1997, when they were $10 a seat and I was in the very last row of the Kingdome, I could touch the roof of the Kingdome from my seats. I'll just say that I paid the same amount for a preseason game that I paid for a regular season game, and that was always wild to me. But of course, the NFL is not going to make the change to cheapen, to reduce the prices on preseason games. They're just going to increase the amount of regular season games and don't give a crap about player safety. That's my read. And it's unfortunate, but I feel like the players give us enough with a 16-game schedule. And affects their lives, shortens their lives, changes the quality of their lives, all for our entertainment and for them to make a good living if it's possible. But for a lot of these guys, they don't even make that great of a living, and they still give their bodies to us, sacrifice their bodies for us, I should say. So I would have preferred 16, but 18's coming. Our new member, Detail Oriented, says 100%. He's demanding, I think he's talking about Mike Macdonald, but teaches so well that players love him despite being a bit of a hard-ass type coach. They know what to expect from him, and that he will be able to help them become the best player they can be. Got a note here from Michael Smith. I hope Macdonald's scheme can unlock Derek Hall as well. The thought of losing that second-round pick hurts. Thank you for being a member, Michael. Yeah, I agree. I talked about this a little bit yesterday, or was it yesterday? Maybe it's 2 days ago when I did my 53-man roster. I think Derek Hall's a guy that's got to be a little bit on notice. I think there's going to be this battle between Derek Hall and Nelson Caesar and maybe a little bit Darrell Taylor for what will be a roster spot, especially if Draymond Jones is counting as an outside linebacker edge on the roster math. I don't think they can keep all those guys, and I'm not convinced that Derek Hall is totally safe unless he comes in and shows he's a different player than he was last year. I'm not saying he won't be, but differently than Boye Mafe, Derek Hall, Boye Mafe flashed maybe two to three pass rushes as a rookie. I was like, oh, okay, I can see that. And he flashed probably 10 to 15 times as a run defender. I was like, oh, yeah, he's a better than average run defender from that position. He's physical. He'll take on blocks. Derek Hall maybe had a couple of flash moments his entire rookie year, and one of them came in a preseason game, his first preseason game. So he's going to have to make a much bigger leap in year one than year two than Boye Mafe made. And that's not to become and have the numbers that Mafe had in year two. That's just to become a interesting player. He's got to make a huge leap from where he was. And let's hope he does. Jeffrey brings up that if you had 18 game schedules, you'd have to have 2 buys, which is true. I'm a big fan of the idea of international week with teams having a bye either the week before or week after. Let me catch up on other news before we wrap up for the day. This has been a marathon 2-hour show. We're going to be back on later today. We'll be back on later today with some more of the crew to talk about the schedule. And I posted what I have for the schedule. And I'm seeing if anyone's got anything new that's come out. Yeah, I don't think so. Let me just double check my different numbers here and different sites that all give me different information. Yeah, I feel like I've got more information about the Seahawks schedule than these purported great sites. We do have a leak about Arizona in week 12. So we already kind of knew that. The Rams in week 9. Yep, we already knew that. And Cardinals. We actually already we did know that already. So yeah, I think we've got essentially what the Seahawks schedule is. We had it by probably 9 a.m. So a little earlier than the 5 p.m. release. And let's take one more look at it before I give you guys your morning, and we'll come back and do some more fun conversations later. I might even come back on. Who knows? But let me share this again. Okay. So this is the Seahawks schedule as it stands. And I think I don't know about you guys, but I think this is a pretty good schedule. I don't have a lot of things. There's not a bunch of like away games in a row. There's not like last year it was Thursday night away game, Thursday night back. There's not a murderer's row on this schedule. What's the toughest stretch? I would say the Falcons might be good this year. We'll see, but I don't think they're necessarily great. The Bills and the Rams back to back is a little tough stretch, but if they get the bye after that, 49ers, I guess the Jets are better this year. They're certainly a really good defense always. And that's on the road. The Vikings, I don't expect to be that good this year. I mean, where's the hardest part of this schedule? I mean, I see from Michael Smith, Miami and Detroit. I don't know. Miami's good, but they weren't dominant last year, and Mike Macdonald played them pretty well. He certainly played the Lions pretty well, and so did the Seahawks. The toughest stretch might be here. 49ers, Falcons, Bills, Rams. 3 of those games are at home, though. And yeah, I don't know. I like the fact the Seahawks aren't going to have a division game until week 6. I like the fact that they open up with 3 of 5 games at home. I like the fact that most of it is alternating home and away. We don't have these big road trip stretches where we're traveling cross country a bunch. Even when you have a back-to-back, you got the Jets cross country, and then you have the Cardinals, which is an easy trip. You have the Bears, and then you have the Rams, which is an easy trip. I don't think there's a lot to complain about with this schedule, to be honest. A mid-season bye. I think that Seahawks fans should feel pretty darn good about this schedule. And now we just got to see what the team does with it. You know, it doesn't matter. Everyone's looking at the Seahawks as probably not that tough of a game. No one's scared of facing the Seahawks. We're probably a little bit like the Falcons. Maybe we're a little bit like the Jets, I guess. I bet teams are more worried about facing the Jets than they are about facing us. But we're a middling team, so I don't think teams are worried about us. They're certainly not circling us on their schedule. And that could work to the Seahawks' favor. Plenipote asks, which games are you going to, Brian? Well, I am a season ticket holder, so I go to all the home games, and I've been to all the home games since 97, essentially. A few misses in there, but pretty much everyone. And then as far as away games, I don't love their away schedule this year, to be honest. I've spent enough time in New York. I don't need to go back to New York. Although maybe that'll be a family trip. We got family out there. Maybe that'll be a reason to do it. I do like Atlanta. I think Atlanta's a fun city. I think the food's good. I don't think I'm going to probably do that. I've been to a game in New England before. It's fine, but I wouldn't really travel for it. I do have family out there, but I don't think I'm going to travel for that. Definitely not going to Detroit. No interest. I could see myself going to the Cardinals game. That's probably the most likely. I love that trip, especially down there in the winter. We got family, we've got friends, we got sun. So that Cardinals game is probably the most likely for me that I'd travel to. Maybe the Rams. I do want to see. I do want to see the Rams new stadium, well, newish stadium, and going down to LA is not the worst thing. Michael Smith asks, "Do I ever sell my tickets?" I like that question. The answer is, I have never, ever sold my tickets. I have given my tickets away to preseason games, and a couple times that I couldn't go because I was traveling or whatever, I've given them away. I've never taken money for my tickets. I've never even taken face value or what I paid. I just give them away. I also only give them to people that I know are Seahawks fans. I don't care if I've got a family or a friend, a family member or a friend who's like a big fan of the opposing team and wants a favor. No, I only let people use my tickets that I know are Seahawks fans. Preseason wise, I tend to try to find people that have kids that don't normally get to go to games. Preseason games are a little less wild and crazy, so it's a good chance to take a kid and get introduced to the sport and to NFL. So I try to find people that would enjoy taking their kids to see a game. But yeah, I've never sold them. And when the Super Bowls that I've gone to a couple of Super Bowls, and I was just talking to somebody when I went to the Super Bowl against the Patriots in Arizona. I don't know if people remember, but the tickets there were going for crazy prices. I actually got offers of $20,000 per ticket, and I couldn't say no fast enough. You could say that's a privilege thing, and surely it is. But here's the thing. You could have given me $3 million. $3 million does not buy me the experience of seeing the game. So unless I could take the money and turn right around and take a portion of it to buy tickets for the Super Bowl so I could still see it, then I would never sell Super Bowl tickets with the Seahawks playing in it. And people are like, "Oh my God, joke's on you. You saw the most humiliating loss in Super Bowl history." Yeah, but I was there for it. I saw it. I don't regret it. I would not take money over having been at that game, even with the result. So, yeah, that's just me. And 100% some of it is privilege, but I know a lot of people that have a lot of money that still like getting more money and will just take money wherever they can get it. And for me, I think life's about collecting experiences. It's not all about it, but one of the things I love best about being a Seahawks fan is the experiences I've had, the people I've met, the relationships I've built. Uh, flying on a team plane to Indianapolis during the Super Bowl season, I'll never forget that. Talking to players and coaches, meeting fans when I'm in London that follow the blog for the London game. You can't buy that. You can't buy that. So I certainly will always try to accentuate and embrace any experience opportunities I get, and not go the other way. All right, folks. Honestly, I could keep talking, and the only thing that's keeping me from doing it is I haven't had breakfast yet. I got to work out. I got some plans I got to finish. So I'm going to let you go. But I'm not going to be gone for that long. I can already tell it's going to be one of those days. I'm going to want to get back on. I'm going to use some of this time between now and the time we get back on. I'm going to create some graphics for our schedule show when we bring on Jeff Simmons and Dana O'Gorman later this afternoon. And now that we got pretty much the full schedule, I can almost guarantee you we're going to go on before 4:30. I can't tell you when, but if you like and subscribe and click the bell to get notified, you will know when we're going live. It's possible I'll go on myself before then. I don't think so, but it might happen. So make sure you do all those things. And then I am going to work on a couple things to add to that show. We'll talk about it. I'll look up some more statistics. I'll look up some more trends. And I hope you all have a great Wednesday. It's a beautiful, beautiful day. And I know I'm planning on having one. So I hope you do well. Thanks for tuning in. Please find your nearest Seahawks fan. Tell them about the show. Recommend it. I would appreciate it. We will be taking Patreon questions. Thank you, Kane. Let me actually make sure we get that into chat. I will, after I finish the show, I will go over to patreon.com/hawkblogger, and then I will make sure anyone that's there is able to ask channel questions for us to answer later today in Real Hawk Talk. So if you're in the Slack channel, you'll be able to ask those questions. Until then, I'm Brian Emhauser. You can find me on Twitter @HawkBlogger. This has been another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. Take care.